Welcome back, everybody, to the Wild Faith Podcast. My name is Evan Bungham, and I have my co-host Luke Timmons with me here today. Today, we're going to be talking about why men stay silent and breaking the chains of isolation, shame, and mental health struggles. So, Luke, how are we doing today?
Good. Doing good. Sun's shining. We've had unseasonably warm weather, but I'm not complaining because we've got a lot of stuff done.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I've enjoyed the warm weather. It's almost been too hot because I don't think we kind of got conditioned for it ready.
Yeah, it was like 80s right off the kick.
But we're finally getting some rain. We've needed rain up north here for a hot minute. We've been in, well, if you don't know, there's been some really bad wildfires going on in northern Minnesota, way north of us. But, we've been in a burn warning, like a red warning for the last, I'd say, almost 2.5 weeks now. So I've got a pile of cardboard that needs to get burned that I can't burn. My lawn is literally about a week away from dying because it's just been so dry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. We had that one nasty storm roll through like a week or so ago. But even that wasn't as initially bad as they thought it was going to be. And now they talked maybe a chance of rain today, but it looks like that's kind of gone out the door. So it'll be interesting because there is not to go into turkey hunting, but it is still relative. But it'll be interesting chasing turkeys this weekend because it's going to be cool off down to the 50s and 60s again, probably more so regular, but it'll be super windy, which I cannot stand hunting turkeys in the wind. So,
I think that's a good opportunity. I mean, like I look at it where, when you get really hot weather like this, turkeys will tend to move to cooler places, creek bottoms, ponds, wherever low ground is, and, relating that to thick cover where hens are nesting at. But it's, wind, like, yeah, man, just hide in the woods.
Yeah.
I'm not jealous you're turkey hunting. I think I've hit the pinnacle point of where my brain can't handle it anymore. And I need like a week break from it.
Yeah, that's where I was at for the first half of the season, going, hard at it, trying to get data bird. And then when you were down, going hard at it, and then kind of gone out a couple times since then, but gonna be getting after it now here with 16 days left in the season.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy. There's 16 left.
Push.
So there's a lot of time left.
Oh yeah. We still got 2 weeks. So
I can't complain. I've had my opportunities. I've whiffed twice, but like we were talking before in the podcast, lessons learned for next year. With the limited time that I have, I will only hunt with a bow if I decide to go with a bow out of a ground blind, because I can think of about, 5 different times that I could have killed a turkey if I would have had a blind rather than sitting no blind with a bow, trying to film it. Just a lot I've even made like makeshift, like little throwdown blinds.
Yep. Yeah. Self-filming with a bow is a whole nother level. I mean, you and I have both killed birds with bows before, and that's fine and dandy. But yeah, when you're trying to do 2 things that require a little bit of movement, yeah, you can get picked off.
Well, I think about it. Probably 80% of my bow kills, because I think I've only killed 5 with a gun. 5 or 6, but the rest of them are bow kills. But I would say 80% of them have been in a blind.
It's just easier. You get away with a lot more movement,
Going with shotgun next year.
There you go.
There's no question in my mind. I'm going to start tallying up the marks in that 16 gauge and just see how many turkeys.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to tell you, but I booked us a triplet for next year. We're going to go knock out the Grand Slam. So,
hey, why not?
Just kidding. It'd be sweet, but
someday when we are retired or we hit the lottery or this podcast provides enough for us where we can go do that, I will be ecstatic and I will gladly go do that.
Yeah. I think I'd probably save it for like a big game hunt, but
yeah,
I like turkey hunting, but there's other things I'd rather knock off the bucket list first.
True.
Than that, but
yeah. So just kind of diving into it now. I mean, talking about mental health, it's Mental Health Awareness Month next month is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And we are kind of, going through these different topics and hope that we can kind of reach out to some of you or people out there that don't know that they didn't need help or they did need help. And, we're working through these things, ourselves. But, today's subject that we wanted to talk about was just kind of why or how, breaking the chains of isolation as men and how and why we feel shame talking about our mental health struggles. So let's just dive into it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good stuff, man. Yeah, it's somewhere along the line we've picked up the bad habit of learning to become more isolated and isolate ourselves, especially emotionally. Kind of you go from your ages of being a kid and wearing your heart on your sleeve maybe a little bit, and then all of a sudden at some point, I think every man goes through it where they just begin to shut down or shut off that emotional part of their being and no longer talk about what's kind of going on between the ears and behind the eyes.
Yeah. I mean, so what do you think are, some messages you think as young men we received growing up that maybe either misguide us or we're just kind of taken the wrong way?
It's a double-edged sword, I think, because, the obvious one is, real men don't cry or toughen up, right? That's same old, but it's a hard line because, it probably sounds a little brash, but like you don't want to be a wuss. But it's hard because you got to be, like I said, you don't want to be quote unquote a wuss, but at the same time, you need to be cognizant that sometimes it's okay to like not have all the answers. It's okay to feel sad, to feel mad, to feel depressed, to feel all these emotions, right? And at some point, you need to be comfortable enough with somebody to talk to them, whether it's your wife or your, brother or your best friend or whoever that is. I think you need to work, and it's something I struggle with for sure, is talking about my feelings because I just don't. And I think you just need to have, it's like your faith. You got to be intentional with it. You have to be able to, it's, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to be able to
express it.
Yeah. But like you're going to feel awkward. You're going to feel like this is wrong. You're going to feel like exposed, right? Like you shouldn't be saying all these things, but it's okay. Like sometimes you need to just get all that shit off your chest and talk to somebody about it, because when you don't, it starts to really bottle up, and that's when you get to the real darker side of all this.
Yeah. And I think it's hard, I look at it like when I was a kid, like, yeah, you're right. There is that fine line of like not suck being a wuss and suck it up. But I think they're different, like I look at it like as a kid, I just think you have the unique ability to just express how you feel. Maybe not when you're a 4-year-old throwing a tantrum, but like, as like
last night,
as like a 12-year-old that's having a bad day. Like, I could talk to my parents, but like, I feel like once you kind of got to like, speaking in men in particular, but like young men, like for me, I didn't really start to feel that dissonance of like, I guess for me, it was always like the unknown of not knowing, not having control. Like I looked at like when I was trying to pick schools for football and going to school and like not knowing where I was going to go, was I going to get a scholarship, where all these different things like that put me in a world of like an emotional distress because I wanted to be with my friends, but yet I wanted to play football and I wanted to go to the school I wanted to go to. And I felt like I had all this pressure. And I feel like, as young kids, there's a lot of different circumstances. And I feel like as the older we get, those start to narrow down more of where it's what's really winding at you. Is it your job? Is it the life you wish you were not, you were living, all these different circumstances of where you try to put yourself on this pedestal or scale where it could come at you from a million different directions, if that's addiction or whatever that might be. But you made a really good point, though. You're kind of talking a little bit and kind of brings us back to like Genesis of where, like it's hard to feel vulnerable of where you feel kind of naked and exposed, and getting to that point of where it's like sometimes you got to be stripped of everything to like get that off your chest.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Friday Fuel for that, or well, it would be last week's Friday Fuel when this pod drops, but talk about a little bit about that. Sometimes you have to be completely at that point where you are on your knees with nothing left in the tank saying, God, I need you. And that's okay. Sometimes like the only answer is going to come from God. Sometimes there's just not an answer that's going to come from a friend or a parent or a loved one, where you just have to be real and honest with God and say, I'm done. Like I surrender. Like my way is not working. Like obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here on my knees trying to talk to you. So I think, you get, life's hard and you get to spots where, that's all that's you got left. And that's okay. But, I think, I don't know whether it's just cultural or things that we put in our own head that begin to pressure us to like, not show our true heart. You know what I mean? Like we just become, we have to be strong, we have to be stoic, we have to be strong or stone faced, where it's like we just emotions out the door. And it's easy to do because I feel like everyone does that, where you start to become afraid of being exposed or judged, and you begin to hide all your emotions because you don't want to be judged. But at the same time, like, it's when I start thinking about this stuff, I'm like, well, who cares what someone else thinks about you?
Yeah.
Outside of your true friends and family, like those are the only ones that truly love you.
Yeah.
So everyone else can kick rocks.
Well, it's very true. And I think
terrible, but
honestly, though, I think it's one of the devil's greatest tricks he plays is making us be so prideful to the fact that we are afraid to express that. And like, it seems like such a simple thing when you talk about it, but just think, for the people listening, and I can think of myself of like, you do something wrong, say you commit whatever sin it is, doesn't have to be a sin, but whatever thing that you're guilty of that you feel, and like you hide from it, or if it's hiding finances, or if it's doing all these different things of where it's like you are digging yourself a deeper hole and you just go deeper and deeper, and it's easier to chase that than it is just to like relinquish that and come honest and clean about whatever is that's happening. But it blows my mind that he has that ability to cast that shadow over us, but that's the beauty of having faith with it all, is where you can just give it up to the Lord, that you can kind of lift that veil off your head and hopefully see, kind of the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. I mean, good point, or a good spot in the Bible. I'd point to anyone who's having a hard time is, crying out or opening up or just talking about what's on their mind is, Christ, right? Through the crucifixion, because God himself, Jesus in the flesh, cried, sweat blood, and cried out on a cross. And that, isn't weakness. That's, I think, raw, true strength, because he wasn't afraid to feel, all that pain and to grieve and to groan. And, so what right do any of us have to try to pretend that we're tougher than God?
Yeah.
So,
well, and kind of just transitioning with that too, going into like, what is, holding those inner thoughts inside of us kind of do to us, not just thoughts, but those feelings, when we finally bottleneck them all together. I mean, ultimately it can lead to a lot of bad things, but, like, just kind of talk about that a little bit.
The thoughts are not saying them out loud.
Yeah. Just not expressing them. I mean, like what that does to the soul.
Kills it. I mean, right. I think it stems to a point, or it comes down to a thing where you're trying to protect yourself and you don't want to feel small or insignificant, and you don't want to open up just to be let down or maybe misunderstood. And so, like for me, like I just tend to stay quiet sometimes, or and call it being strong or stoic, like, oh, I'm just not gonna talk about that or feel that right now. But really, it's fear being wrapped up in whatever ego, you may have going on, I think. And that's killing the parts of that's slowly killing the parts that God's trying to heal within you, I think. And so like I said earlier, like it's gonna feel awkward and just bleh, like sometimes when you
Mm-hmm.
try to talk about this stuff, because it is awkward and that stuff. And but that's where you start to really heal. And that's, whether you have good friends, family, you know maybe it's the local church, whatever that is, your hunting buddies. Just if they're really your friend, they're not going to judge you, and it sometimes maybe it'll take you opening up to somebody and then judging you and be like, oh, I guess I didn't really know that they weren't really my friend. And then you can kind of,
Mm-hmm.
start to heal that way a little bit too. So
Well, it brings up an interesting point. Like, once again, like we've talked about this on the podcast a lot of times, I think God interjects himself in a lot of very unique and thoughtful ways that only is relatable to you.
mm,
And like you were just saying, like if that's a person that calls you out on something that really gives you a reality check,
mm,
or if that's a loss of a spouse, unfortunately, or a job or whatever it might be, where, there's like little things that he's guiding you to the path back to him. And I think a really good scripture on this one is Psalm 32, 3-5. And it says, when I keep silent, my bones wasted away. Then I acknowledge my sin to you.
mm,
And, kind of just going off of that, I think it's exactly what we're talking about, of where, it's one of those things we bury all these inner thoughts and feelings inside, that it's keeping us, and it's honestly, it's affecting our relationship with God, because God knows everything.
mhm,
He knows your thoughts. He knows what you've done and what you're thinking of doing. And it's like we've talked about before. He's just sitting there waiting for you to acknowledge that, own up to it, ask for mercy and forgiveness. And I think there's so much grace that goes within that, of when you're in that low, vulnerable spot, of where he's going to be there to catch you.
mhm. Yeah. Amen, brother. That's well said. What who would you say suffers the most when we tend to stay silent, or, you know, bottle things up and not be our true self maybe?
That's a loaded gun.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I would say I think God's really sad, but I mean, that's kind of maybe not the answer people want to hear. But I really think outside of ourselves, I think it's just the people around you, your family. I mean, hopefully you have a support of people that are around you, but I think it's pretty relative and obvious, when someone's going through a dark time, that other people can see that, because people know the you and the real you. We've all gone through transformations in our lives, of where we've had good times and bad times, and matured through just life. And, but typically kind of everybody has a general aura of who they are and what they are. And people come to know that, like if you're a happy go lucky dad, and then all of a sudden you are stone cold quiet, that's
Mhm.
my dead giveaway. If I'm quiet, something's weird,
Something's up.
because I can't shut up. So it's
No.
it's kind of a giveaway, but like it's one of those things where I think it does ultimately affect others around you, because I just think in my own circumstances, of where I'm very thankful. I have so many people around me that are nurturers, to where they just want to help. And sometimes we have such a hard time grasping that we can't take help.
Mm,
And it makes it where it almost makes the situation worse, because it's like, I don't need your help. I'm going to figure this out on my own. And I think ultimately that puts a lot of strain on other people. And, in retrospect, it brings a lot of like memories back to like with my dad. It was like one of those things where it's like tried, we all tried, or we thought we were trying. And in hindsight, it's 2020. Maybe we did too much. And, but I don't know. It's like this. It's one of the catch 22s, where it's just like you never know.
mm.
But I do think it could go so many different ways. But I do think it ultimately affects people around you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Would you say you do a good job managing your pain, or do you tend to bury it more often? And if you are doing a good job, what are some things that you do that someone that's listening could maybe try?
Yeah, definitely. I really think when I'm not walking with the Lord, think of a couple different times in my life. Like I always believed in God. I've always have since I've been a little kid. But there's been many times where I've been distant. I haven't been
Mhm.
close. I think of my college years. Like I said, my coming to faith was kind of after my dad passed, where I really just submitted myself. But I think of all those times when I wasn't close, of what I felt like and how bad I felt, and not seeing any reprieve from it outside of my own, like trying to fix my own wounds. And then ultimately, like going through, which was probably the worst day of my life with my dad passing, to where I got so much healing from that. And I learned so much. I matured in my faith. I felt so much stronger. And like I said, I've said it before too. It's not it wasn't like a good thing that my dad passed, but
Mm.
there was a lot of beauty and blessings that came from it, through that healing. And that's where I think there's so much grace in that perspective of like getting that forgiveness and getting kind of that restoration of faith. But I mean, if I had to give any advice, I mean, it's kind of what we were talking about with what we do in this podcast. I mean, it's just building a relationship with God. It's just
Mhm.
like, even if that starts in the smallest of small ways of
Oh yeah.
hey God, I don't know if you're listening right now. Even if, just like one of those Hail Marys that you throw up, you see it in the movies and stuff, but it's like, hey, that's a start.
Mhm.
That's better than not saying a prayer. And then you kind of mature as you go along, where you start to feel like you've got a friend that you can kind of have this conversation with and kind of go through and walk through these things together. But I really think having a really strong faith foundation, and sometimes that takes you reaching out to a church or
Mhm.
finding a mentor that is deep in his faith that can kind of help guide you through that. But I also think a really good support group of good friends. Like if you're
Yep.
surrounding yourself with people that are only digging the hole deeper to whatever your addiction or your
Mhm.
pain or whatever that is, like get away from that. Find people who are going to love you up, embrace for who you are and what you're doing. And I think those are probably some of the best things, advice that I could probably give.
Mhm. Yeah, dude. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, because it's something that I think every man longs for is to be fully known and still fully loved, right?
Mm.
It's and when you are able to have, that conversation with God, I think it's pretty liberating. Like almost feels like you're coming up from air after being underwater for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that Jesus love, that Jesus kind of love that we're all aching for, like I said. And I think because we're being, when we're having those conversations with God or Jesus or whatever, like you're being seen in your absolute worst. Like they know you, they know what you've done, know your thoughts and everything, and they still love you. They still embrace you. And that's the grace. And I think that's sometimes like the world's just not going to be able to offer you that, but your
Yeah.
relationship with Christ and God can. And then, like you said, when you are able to find people who truly love you, who support you, who build you up, who are excited for you when you have, good things happen, like that's real. Those are the relationships that you need to embrace and build and just stoke that fire, because that's where you really can get some healing out of that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And kind of contradictive to that, I mean, I also feel like there's a little bit of weight on our shoulders as well as
Mm.
being good brothers or, whatever sisters, whatever that might be, of where, how do you feel about this? Saying that you're in a good situation, but
Hmm.
you've got a sibling or a friend or whoever it might be that's in a really bad spot that needs some guidance. I mean, like, is that something where do you feel obligated as, not just as a good human being, but as a Christian that that even if that's a hard conversation to have, to call somebody out?
Yeah. But I think a lot of times we try to be Mr. or Mrs. Fix It. When a lot of times somebody just wants to get something off their chest that they've never been able to. And if you're the
Yeah.
first person who lets them do that, but then you try and tell them like, you know, this is what you should try and do. They don't want it. They don't need that shit. I mean, seriously, like that's one of the most frustrating things I see or hear sometimes is like, you got to just let somebody sometimes heal on their own. And when they ask for help, then help. But a lot of times, like that initial step, and that's the scariest step to take, is they just need to get something off their chest that's
Yeah.
been brewing. And if you're the first person that they trust, that they're like, you know, come to you with whatever problem it is, whether it's whatever, and you're like, oh, I know what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
What a turnoff! Like that drives me nuts. Like you
Well,
got to
that's why I brought it up. I think that's one of the hardest things we have, or I shouldn't say we have, the hardest things we do as human beings is we have that tendency of where it's like, oh, I've never been through this, but here's a solution. Just because we're trying, you know, we're just trying to be nice.
Yes.
And maybe that's a Minnesota. Sure. Maybe that's a Minnesota nice thing. I don't know, but it's like where we're just trying to be nice. I'm just trying to help you. I think of like my wife all the time, where it's like, I give unsolicited advice that does not matter, because I don't need to tell her that, because she doesn't want to hear that. She just wants me to listen. And I need to get better at that. But I think that just goes with anything, where there's so many people that are out there that they just want to talk, and you just need to shut up and listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Let them just get it off their chest. Cause like we were saying earlier, like when you're able to do that, how good does that feel?
Yeah.
But when you go to somebody and say, this is what I got going on, and they immediately turn to either trying to fix it, or, and maybe this goes back to some of the courses I took in college a little bit, but like when they immediately go into trying to fix it, or, well, let me tell you about this one time that happened to me. Like, you're not listening, dude. Like, you're not listening to that person. They just want you to just, like you said, shut up and listen. Yep. And when they ask you the exact question of, well, what would you do in this situation? Then you can tell them what you would do. But like, you know, it's a hard line. It's a hard line. And it's sometimes it's not going to be black and white. It's not going to be like, yep, I just need to shut up and listen. And then it's going to be peachy keen. You may have to call someone out on their shit sometimes. Like, dude, like you are screwing things up, man. Like,
I will say
this is your come to Jesus moment, right?
Yeah. I will say there's some things where it's like, you know, I think we both matured enough and surrounded ourselves with people that we like and that we love and we respect them, as that's why we surround ourselves with them. And we've distanced ourselves from the people that don't walk in that same light that we feel, maybe, you know, and that's just everybody in life as you mature and have kids or whatever your life is, you know. But to your point, yeah, I think there is some times where it's like, dude, you need to figure your shit out. And I am like, you just get a point, you get sick of it. But at the same time, like through all this stuff that we talk about, I'm not going to compare it to turkey hunting, but kind of, where it's like, it's you gotta read the room. You got to be good at reading emotions, and you need to figure out what the temperament is. And that's where, honestly, here's some good advice for people that are out there that are in this situation. Pray about it. Ask God, you know, if you know that you have to have a conversation with somebody, or, you know, you just pray that, hey, I pray that I can listen and I can hear these people, or I pray that I can speak to them in words that you would want to say, because I think that's something that we just do as humans as well. Is like we just said it earlier. It's like we just blab stuff out of our mouth. Like sometimes it's better to be quiet and think, and like you can pray without speaking. You know, you can have inner thoughts in your head. You can talk with God at any given time.
Yeah, dude. Good stuff. It's hard. I mean, it's really easy to sit here and tell things that you should do or shouldn't do, or how to do this and that. But when you're in the thick of it, you know, that's when it really, you know, comes to the forefront. And it's hard because some days, we want to step into the light, and other days we don't, because sometimes the dark feels safer because like the spotlight's not on me. It's whatever, but deep down, I think everyone gets to a point where you're just tired of
Yeah.
pretending. You're tired of hiding, and you just
It's like a race you can never finish.
yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be messy. It's gonna be awkward when you decide to finally open up. But if you're someone who's listening who hasn't done that, like, just do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna suck. You're gonna feel like a whatever, but eventually you're gonna get some healing out of it because you know.
Well, and I think with that too, not just for yourself, but for other people in
Mm,
whatever facets of life it is, if it's work or your family or friends or whatever, is like, I think you kind of build a little bit of respect for being vulnerable to where,
like with somebody else.
yeah, of where
Mm,
it's like, and kind of goes back to what we were just talking about too, where it's like, it's amazing how you tell a story and someone else feels like that. Speaking about myself, of where it's like, you tell me a story, I'm going to tell a story.
mm-hmm,
But it's one of those things where I think that is a good thing for us to be able to do that. And I think it's a good sign of showing that you are human and
mm-hmm.
that you are vulnerable and you can express yourself.
Yeah, dude. It's it's part of it. It's part of life. It's life's not made to be easy. It's not made to be peachy keen all the time. You just some days are better than some days are better, some days are worse. You just got to try and stack up more good days than bad, and sometimes you're going to have 2 weeks of bad. But then you got to remember, like, well, I also just had a few months of really goodness. So, it's tough because I hate to even say this, but you get into that, you got to almost, it's hard because like right where my head went right there, it's like, well, suck it up, you know?
Yeah.
Right. But like at
Yeah.
the same time, like sometimes you do have to just suck it up, you know,
Yeah.
get, put your head down, get through it. And it's gonna suck. But
Well, I
you
think I
also
think
have
there's
to.
part of that though too, or you know, being a little more spiritually connected, of where you can kind of feel things out, where
Mm,
it's like, God wants me to go through this, and you pray about that. If it's whatever it is, you're having a hard time, your financials are rough or whatever that might be, where it's like, you know what, I have means to survive. This sucks. Yeah.
mm-hmm,
I got to just fight through this. But giving that up to the Lord and knowing that he's going to get me through this, he's never going to put anything in front of you that you can't handle.
mm-hmm,
It's always going to make you a stronger human being for what it is. But yeah, there's there's a fine line of where it's like, all right, I don't know if I can handle this. But like you said earlier in the podcast, I mean, we're not Jesus, but what did Jesus go through when he got
mm,
crucified?
a lot.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, that should be a hype anthem for you to think of, like what you can mentally go through as a human being.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
it's good, man. I mean, if I, you know, I like my head just goes like, because we've all been in that spot where we're struggling or not knowing which way to turn or whatever, and it's just like, Evan and I, we don't know what you're going through. Um, we don't know what keeps you up at night or just the struggles that you have and the pain
mhm,
that you've maybe learned to live with. But I do know, like, you aren't made to carry it alone.
mhm,
Like, don't bottle it up. You're not supposed to slap on the smile and pretend everything's fine. Like, it does hurt. And when you do that stuff, that's a slow death,
yeah,
right? Like that's all it is. That's the truth. And like, we've all been there. Like, we're praying for you, and that's all we can do. But like, you just got to find those people that are going to lift you up, get good with God, and trust in the end that everything's going to work out, because it will. It may seem shitty right now, but it'll get better. Just
yeah.
gotta keep the faith. you know Walking by sheer faith alone sometimes, right?
Amen to that. You answered my question. I didn't even get to ask it.
Yeah,
So that was pretty good. Yeah, no, guys, just, kind of closing it out here. This is a short one, but, I think it's a really powerful one though. And if you feel alone, you're not alone. There's always someone that's there that's willing to listen and talk to you. And if you feel like you are alone and you don't have anybody, give it up to the Lord. Pray about it. Say a little prayer. Start small. Yep. Like I said, it doesn't have to be this Hollywood production prayer. Just, you don't even have to close your eyes, fold your hands, just start talking. Yeah. That's all he wants. He just wants you to talk to him.
Yeah. There might be some gasps from what I'm about to say, but like, it's okay to cuss at God. Like, in a sense, hear me out. Like, like what the, what is going on? Like, not swearing at him as in like, I'm mad at you or whatever, but like more so like, just be real. Like, get it out. Like, talk to you like you would with a friend or a brother or a sister or whoever that is. And just like, if you need to cry. He can handle it. He's, but then like you said, start there, start small, start with praying to God, just being open and honest. But you do, I think, eventually need to find somebody that you can talk with, because it just helps a little bit more, don't wait for
makes it more human.
Yeah. Don't wait for the perfect moment, just work on it, even if things start feeling wrong or your voice starts shaking and
this might sound random, but like, once again, I feel like God puts you in situations and puts people in your life that are really unexpected. And I can't explain how many times this has happened before, of where all of a sudden it's like you're thinking a certain thought or something's going through your head, and then someone just out of nowhere, you could be in a crowd or a public place, comes up and starts talking, and you're like, whoa, here. Like, this is weird. So, I mean, don't be afraid to have a conversation with a stranger. Or if someone comes up to you, don't turn that opportunity down, because sometimes that's maybe Jesus directly speaking to you, But no, this was a good one. And I'm looking forward to the next month and a half here and kind of closing through this stuff. But I think hopefully these are helpful for you guys. And like I said, we'll be praying for everybody and anybody out there that wants our prayers. And we'd love to hear from you too. I mean, if you've had some tough times that you've gone through that you feel like you can bring some inspiration or light to others that might need it, we'd love to hear it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through faith in the great outdoors. We hope today's episode has inspired you to seek God's presence in the wilderness and deepen your connection with nature. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to the Wild Faith Podcast on your favorite platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll continue to be a part of the Wild Faith Podcast community. We'd also love to hear from our listeners, so please don't hesitate to reach out with your questions, comments, or topic suggestions. You can connect with us on social media or through our website. Your feedback is important to us and helps us improve and tailor our content to better serve you. And always remember, the great outdoors isn't just a playground for hunting and fishing. It's a sanctuary for finding solace and spiritual renewal. As you gear up for that next adventure, I pray you find God's presence in the crackling of a campfire, the thrill of reeling in your catch, or the quiet solitude found in nature. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Wild Faith Podcast. Take care, and God bless.